Well, it's Father's Day here all across the country. And for all the fathers that are out there, happy Father's Day to you. This is your day. Enjoy it. And those of you that have your fathers with you, your father figures, make sure that you make it a special day for them. Also, we've got upcoming elections coming up on this Tuesday here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But today, we have a special guest with us to talk to us about the importance of Juneteenth. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric LaVille. We'll be right back in just a moment. Welcome back. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric LaVille. We're so happy to have you with us and joining us on this Sunday, as you always do, as we broadcast from the campus of the Norfolk State University from WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA. We also like to thank our producer who's in studio with us, Marvin Folks, also known as DJ Scandalous, which you can hear every day, Monday through Friday, from 2 to 6 p.m., Saturday, and yes, on Sunday, the hardest working man in radio. As always, I'd like to give a special shout out to all of our supporters and those of this great institution, the Spartan Nation, some of the greatest alumni, faculty, staff, administrators, and students in the world. You know, today is a very special day. It's when we recognize our fathers. So once again, I want to say happy Father's Day to all of you who are out there who are fathers, and not just fathers, but also father figures. You know, it's very special to have your father in your life. Those of you that know, I buried my father on last year, who is my greatest friend and example. And, you know, we have a great legacy of my sons and my brother and his sons and all others in our family. So this is a special day for all fathers, and I want you to definitely enjoy this day. As I also mentioned, those of you that have been listening to the show, you know that we've had our June primary election series preview. So coming up this Tuesday is election day. So make sure you go out and vote. June 20th is primary election day. This is where you will choose the representative that you want to represent your party in the upcoming general election in November. So go out and vote. It's a very important election. And, you know, in Hampton Roads, we've got an extremely important two Senate elections where we have Senate districts we have two legislators, Senator Lucas and Spruill, in their Senate district, and also here, the new Senate district in the city of Norfolk. So go out and vote. Make sure that your voice is heard. This is your opportunity to make sure that you get the representative that you want. You know, and also, you know, today is also another very important day that we have coming up tomorrow, and that is Juneteenth. Now, in the African-American community, we've known about Juneteenth for quite some time, but, you know, it's currently gotten, you know, the recognition across the country as a federal holiday, and here in the Commonwealth of Virginia as a state holiday. And Juneteenth, with it being a holiday and all, and us giving the opportunity to have these celebrations, we know it as a holiday commemorating and marking really the end of slavery in all of the United States. You know, it's a lot to unpack here. And to do this, I'm very fortunate to have with me my very good friend. And those of you that know him, he's a phenomenal historian, Nathan Richardson, also known as Mr. Frederick Douglass. Nathan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really great. It's good to be talking to you, Doctor. And happy Father's Day to you and to my son. And my son has given me two grandsons. Myself, like you, lost my father this past year, and so we probably what makes us good friends is men who are trying to be good dads.
Absolutely. I say it all the time. There's, other than being a husband, there's no other the greatest title that I have in this world is being a father. I mean, I love it.
Right.
It's an opportunity for to really create and instill and motivate and mold and shape, you know, the futures leaders of our families, the future leader of our community and the world. And just being a dad is phenomenal. So it's truly a blessing.
Yeah.
So with that, Nathan, we've known each other for a long time, and of course, the listeners of this show know that I have an affinity for history, especially legal history. And I remember years ago, you and I met at Hampton University Museum, where you were
Yeah.
doing and this was, when I say years ago, I have the pictures. My sons, who are now in college and seniors in high school, and living on their own in an old apartment, they were little boys
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
And I was just really, amazed at the interpretation, that you gave during that time period. And it was phenomenal. And since that time, you and I have forged a phenomenal friendship, and I really value it and value your input and your knowledge and all that you do to make sure that our history is not lost and is still made relevant today.
Yes. I'm definitely very blessed. And, if I look back to that first meeting where you saw me as Douglas, and I've been doing this now about 10 years, 9 really seriously. I certainly wouldn't have thought that I would still be doing Frederick Douglass now. But his life was so expansive and basically covered all of the 19th century. And the things that are happening now that demand that we go back in history to find out where we've come to understand where we're going, has given my portrayal of Frederick Douglass longevity. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, what we're going to do, we're going to give our audience a very special treat here. I want you to switch your hats now, from Nathan Richardson to Frederick Douglass. And I want to have a discussion with Mr. Frederick Douglass, whom, from me reading his history, a person that I truly admire as him being an advisor to some of the most powerful people in the world, and really the force behind the scenes of upward mobility of African Americans, the ending of slavery, and the beginning of the new life for Black people in our country. So, Mr. Frederick Douglass, for our audience today, tell us, what is the history of Juneteenth? How do we get here?
Well, certainly it's great to be talking to you, Dr. Lavelle. As I understand it, and with all due respect to your great position as a historian and your platform in which you bring that knowledge, I am here with unusual diffidence. I'm very excited to be talking to you in this modern era, the year of our Lord 2023. Yes, and so it seems like there's great activity around Jubilee in the modern era. I keep getting phone calls to speak on this topic from everyone in the modern era, and I was just recently, this past Monday, speaking to the citizens of Newport News, Virginia, on this peculiar topic. The history is that, of course, on the first day of January 1863, when I was in Boston, waiting for the Emancipation Proclamation to come down, that we certainly were thrilled, excited about the prospect of our freedom, that we would be now free and unbonded. And so, of course, we had to digest the Emancipation Proclamation, and there was quite a deal of conjecture as to what exactly the Emancipation Proclamation meant, in that Mr. Lincoln had excluded some counties, the 48 counties of West Virginia, Port Clemens, St. Bernard, Norfolk, Portsmouth. All of these counties, he had given them an exemption. And so there were many of us who were saying, well, perhaps he had not freed us at all. But of course, that went to his prudence and his thinking as an honest boatman, that he wanted to save the Union, and this was his paramount call to save the Union, that he would give those border states a pass because they were on the side of the Union, but still owned slaves. And so he gave them a pass until until we could end the war, and then he would outrightly abolish slavery. And I often say that although Lincoln made the end of slavery by proclamation, it was actually Grant that actually delivered us out of bondage. But once this happened, of course, now we have Reconstruction, and part of that Reconstruction is to ensure that slavery is abolished in every corner of the Union. And certainly there were many Southerners who were trying to avoid this at all costs. Even my brother Eliza and Sister Perry had been caught up in that process. That they were moved south and west to avoid being released into freedom. And so it took the energy and efforts of the government to send soldiers south to ensure that slavery was respected, that the Emancipation Proclamation was respected in all rights. And it took Gordon Granger until 1865, June of 1865, to reach Galveston, Texas, where he would read the General Order Number 3. He and the Buffalo Soldiers went down there, and he read that proclamation, which stated basically that the relationship between slave and slave master would now become that of employer and employee. That's the phraseology that I like. Yes, sir.
It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Lavelle, and today we're talking about Juneteenth with none other than Mr. Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass, when we talk about the employer-employee relationship, what was your view during that time period of the possibility of Black people being able to transition immediately out of slavery into being a part of the fabric of this country?
Yes, absolutely. And so I would certainly come right out of that phraseology of employee and employer to say that we wanted the franchise. And by what I mean by the franchise, meaning that we are socially, politically invested in the United States democracy, that we have full access to everything that is guaranteed by the Bill of Rights. And so that would be the whole objective of Reconstruction and everything we were doing after after Jubilee. I think you all now call it Juneteenth, that we were working towards. And so all of those celebrations that we had coming out of Galveston across the country were in that endeavor to make sure that we were fully enfranchised in American democracy. And so because of that, because we believe that the Constitution was not a dead letter, that we would be adding amendments to the Constitution to guarantee that enfranchisement, meaning the 13th, 14th, and the 15th Amendment.
You know, and with those amendments, give us your work behind the scenes with President Abraham Lincoln at that time and what it took to get that done.
Well, unfortunately, I was not able to have much work with President Lincoln. He was assassinated, as you might know, that the Red Hand of Violence assassinated him, not because of personal hate, for no man who ever knew Abraham Lincoln could hate him, but because of his fidelity to union and liberty. And so I found myself having to deal with his President Johnson, who certainly was not a friend of mine,
right?
Who alleged himself to be the Moses of the Black people. And I basically, when I was talking to him about how we would proceed forward with the enfranchisement, with Reconstruction, I had to tell him to his face, you, sir, are not the Moses of the Black people, but you might be, in fact, the Pharaoh. So yes, this is part of why we're speaking, a couple of decades later, that we really fell apart as far as Reconstruction and our ability to celebrate our emancipation and Juneteenth and everything. It started to fall apart. And so we really had to struggle now to reposition ourselves and find ourselves a path forward. One of the things, and this was a speech that I was giving many times during that period. I first gave this in Boston in 1865. What the black man wants. What the black man wants. And the first question that came up among to all of us abolitionists is, what shall we do with the Negro? And my question was, do nothing with us. Your doing has already played mischief with us. Do nothing with us. Just get out of the way. You know, if you see us going to school, let us alone. If you see us going to the ballot box, let us alone. If you see us going to a workshop, just let us alone. Your interference is doing us a serious injury. And so this is what I was saying to everyone involved, that we as a nation of colored people needed to ensure that we're fully enfranchised in American democracy, that we're able to build our own homes and churches and schools and become educated and those sorts of things. That's part of being in the franchise.
Well, Mr. Douglas, you would be today, you would probably be surprised or delighted, I would say, to know that as African Americans, we've made tremendous strides. There's still a lot of struggles, but tremendous strides. Case in point, you talked about education. Today, of course, across the board, all Americans have the opportunity for free public education. Now, of course, it's funded through tax dollars and the like, but public education. And then we have the opportunity to apply and receive funding to go to college to help better ourselves. Home ownership is available, the ability to raise your families. And we also, in this country, have had the first African-American black president and the first African-American black female vice president in the history of the country. From your view, how does that progress sit in your view of the U.S.?
Well, those are astonishing accomplishments, especially when you say that there is a woman vice president. And so part of our universal suffrage was that I stood with the women to demand rights for the women as well. And that was hampered by those who did not want the women with the full enfranchisement. As a matter of fact, they put the black man in front of the woman, in front of not only Susan B. Anthony, but my wife and my daughter, Rosetta. They put the black man ahead of the women. And so to hear that women now have some franchise in democracy is a wonderful thing. But I certainly would also say that though you have these advantages, and what we saw in the mid-19th century was that there are always forces who are trying to take back the gains that you have achieved. And so specifically in the primary franchise of voting, you may have the right to vote. So what are the forces that are trying to take those things back from you? Again, what I was saying to the people at that time, some said that the black man was ignorant. One of the main objections to the franchise of voting was the black man was ignorant. And I said to them, if you may say he is ignorant, but if he knows enough to be hung, he knows enough to vote. If he knows enough to pay his taxes, he knows enough to vote. If he knows enough to shoulder a musket and fight for the flag, he knows enough to vote. If the colored man knows enough when he is sober, as the Irishman knows when he is drunk, he knows enough to vote. So where are you today on the issue of voting?
Wow. Voting. Here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we have a very important election. The primary election is coming up, as I mentioned at the beginning of our show, on the 20th, and we have an opportunity to send representatives to the Capitol here to, be elected and represent the people of the community. How important was the ballot box during that time?
Yes, it was extremely important for our survival and our full enfranchisement in democracy. And of course, the colored race is not a monolithic thought pattern. There were some who had different ideas about what that meant. As a matter of fact, I was widely ridiculed or criticized by being part of a delegation going down to Santo Domingo, considering the annexation of Santo Domingo. And many colored people claimed that I was betraying them by talking about annexing a free black state, a free black country. But of course, my motives were ulterior, and I wanted to see a whole millions of new black people voting in America. That's what I wanted, and so I thought that would be a process that would get more colored people on the road to vote. And so it was extremely important. And then, of course, as soon as we had that franchise, and I was actually kept my residence in New York, and was actually one of the voting officials in New York, that I would take a ballot box full of votes to be counted. Yours truly. That I wanted to be fully engaged in this electoral process. Yes, sir.
You know, it's the year of 2023, and of course, this is almost 200 years post the first Juneteenth, or a Freedom Day, as we call it during that time period. If we have a lot of celebrations today. Of course, it's a federal holiday. It's a holiday, state holiday here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're talking to the people today. How important is Juneteenth today? How relevant is it?
Well, I without any firsthand knowledge of where you are now in the franchise, I would say that you still need to be agitated. You still need to be civically engaged in American democracy, and to make sure that whatever gains you've had, you are not losing them behind the curtain, and that any celebrations that you have would not be caught up in the novelties of what we started in Juneteenth, as far as, I'm talking about the novelties of strawberry cake and soda pop and music and those sorts of things, that you would also be having discussions around your democracy, that you would be showcasing black businesses, black churches, black schools, and showing the country, yourselves and the country, that the black man is just as capable as the white. And so if you go to a celebration, you should be looking for these things. You should be looking for those who are trying to bring new voters to the ballot box. Yes. Absolutely.
You mentioned the celebration during that time and now. If you could think back for us, tell us, how was that first celebration, that knowing that, African Americans, blacks were then freed from slavery, ready to begin their new life?
Well, it was a jubilee. It was a jubilee, and that's why we started calling it a jubilee. There was everything possibly that you might have. I'm sure you all still have strawberry cake and soda pop. You still have music. You still have fireworks. We had all of those things because it was certainly a jubilant time for us, an exciting time about what we would do with our new freedom. But we were also still very engaged, very organized as to how we would affect change and in the Constitution to ensure that we had equal rights. So we are talking about especially the 14th Amendment, giving us equal protection under the law. Then these are things that will help ensure that nobody can come back, like, say, a Judge Tawney, who denied Dred Scott his rights. These sorts of things by the forces inside our federal government. I was saying, I keep going back to this speech, what the black man wants, when I was saying to them, I believe that when all the tall heads of the rebellion have been swept down, and they were swept down, that when all the Davises and the Stevenses and the Toombses have been blotted out, there will still be a rank undergrowth of treason interfering with the quiet operation of the federal government. So that's what you should be considering when you, at the same time you're celebrating, at the same time you are talking about this freedom, you should be aware that there are forces interfering with the quiet operation of your government. And this is also true of what I spoke on when I spoke on the 4th of July, the same sort of theme.
Absolutely. Democracy was worth fighting for then, and it's worth fighting for now. Freedoms that we have, we can't take it for granted because many people lost their lives. Many people sacrificed ultimately the sacrifice for what we have today. So for this Juneteenth, we honor our ancestors. We honor those allies that fought for us, and we honor people like Frederick Douglass and many, many others that toiled and strove and ensured that the future is bright for not just Black Americans, but all Americans. Mr. Frederick Douglass, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Citizen. Thank you so much, Dr. Lavelle.
Absolutely. Brother Richardson, tell us a little bit about, now we're switching back to Nathan Richardson now. Listen, and our closing moments, again, I really appreciate your knowledge and what you bring to the table and just giving the history, not just here in Hampton Roads, but across the country as Frederick Douglass. In a few moments here, tell us what you have coming up and how we can follow you. Yes.
Well, I'm very blessed. You can actually Google my name, Nathan Richardson, and you can find myself and Frederick Douglass. But my website is www.scpublishing.com. But I tell you what, anytime you federalize something, there are dollars behind it. And I've been very fortunate that Juneteenth, the month of June, has become a windfall for me as far as the opportunities to be able to go out and teach. I remember back, say, 30 years ago when I met Sherry Bailey, who was one of the only people in Hampton Roads talking about Juneteenth. She literally brought the idea to Juneteenth here to the Hampton Roads community, and she was the only one doing anything like that. Now, this month, I have 6 events in 5 states throughout the month of June. So I just finished Newport News on Monday. Saturday, I'll be in Louisa, Virginia. I'll go from there to Oxon Hill Farm in Oxon Hill, Maryland. From there to Valley Forge in Pennsylvania, and from there to Winchester, Massachusetts. So just so many opportunities to speak to different audiences across the country.
Absolutely.
And educate people about our history. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we got to have you back. I always enjoy talking with you about history and so forth, but it's so good to have you. That's Nathan Richardson, also historian, also known as Frederick Douglass. And again, once again, we thank you for joining us here on Save the Water. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers, and go out and enjoy this Juneteenth and on tomorrow. And don't forget to vote on Tuesday. Father's Day today, Juneteenth tomorrow, Monday, and voting on Tuesday. Listen, be great, God bless, and we'll see you next week for our election recap for the primary here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. God bless. See you later.